Great. Well, thanks for having me. So again, I'm Emily Jones. I'm a pollution prevention specialist at Madison Metropolitan Sewers District. We are the wastewater agency for the Madison Metropolitan region. So we take in wastewater. So this is different from road salt reduction. We are impacted by road salt, but when we're talking about what's getting into the sewer system, most of what we get comes from water softeners. So today I'm going to talk about the chloride impacts of water softeners on the sewer system and the downstream waters from wastewater treatment plants, and a plumbing device, a blending valve. That's something that we've been exploring more and more as an option for homeowners, for residents to reduce their overall salt use, even when they have a water softener in place. So as a little background, so if you live in Madison or the Madison area, or you're in a region that uses groundwater, you probably are familiar with what this device is. So this is a water softener. Water softeners use salt, like you can see in this brine tank, to swap out the minerals in hard water for sodium. So that continues into the house. The minerals stay behind in the water softener. But the chloride from that salt just flushes through the softener and ends up in the sewer system. So every bag of salt the water softener uses ends up in the wastewater sewer, comes to the wastewater treatment plant. This is the Nine Springs wastewater treatment plant, the treatment plant operated by the sewers district here in Madison. Treatment plants like this one, most wastewater treatment plants are not designed to remove salt. So all of those bags of salt that go down the water softener leave into treated wastewater that goes to the environment. So this is going into a freshwater stream. And so, of course, too much chloride, too much salt is a concern for fresh water. We have a discharge permit. We need to keep our chloride below a certain maximum level. And so we're working to reduce the amount of chloride that's getting into the wastewater system. So rather than build expensive desalination technologies essentially here at the wastewater plant, we've been focusing on upstream pollution prevention. So reducing chloride before it even goes down the drain. Some advantages of that, the reasons that we're pursuing pollution prevention is one, it's less expensive than treatment upgrades. So if we were to upgrade the plants to remove chloride here, it would be reflected in much higher sewer bills. So if we can reduce it upstream, we're avoiding those sewer bill increases. This also avoids these massive energy increases and greenhouse gas footprints of having to treat to remove chloride. So we're trying to do this to reduce energy impacts as well. Also, pollution prevention is comprehensive and long-term. If we can change our behaviors, change our norms and status quo, so we're overall using less salt, a salt level that's sustainable, that's not going to threaten our fresh waters, then this is something we can continue in the decades to come. There are different paths that we are taking and encouraging to reduce chloride that's coming to the wastewater sewer system. Basically, you can divide those paths into that both result in less salt use. One is increasing the efficiency of water softeners and getting more efficient water softeners installed in our system, the system or the communities that are discharging to the sewer system. And the other route is softening less water, but I'm going to focus on more efficient water softeners first, just to put this in context. One thing that we've been doing in the history of our chloride pollution prevention program is encouraging increased softener efficiency. And just to run down what an efficient softener looks like, this may be review, but again, I want to get this information out there because this is an important part of reducing salt pollution as well. We want all of the water softeners in our area to be programmed to an efficiency of at least 4,000 grains per pound. So that means each pound of salt that's going into a water softener can remove at least 4,000 grains of hardness. So it's kind of like miles per gallon on a car. The higher that number is, the more efficient the softener is at using salt. So overall, it uses less salt. Also, they should be programmed to match the hardness of the source water. So that means the level, the grains per gallon of hardness in a well serving a home can vary, and we want to make sure that the water softener reflects that actual number. So for instance, 22 grains per gallon shown here. Softeners have a lifespan, so generally they lose efficiency each year of their life. We want them to be under 15 years old. Once softeners get to 15 years old, they probably have lost some efficiency and are due for a replacement. And we want all softeners in our area, not just our area, but statewide and beyond, to regenerate based on the actual amount of water they've softened. So based on the water use or the demand, not a period of days. This is also kind of called a time clock softener. So all of these factors are what make an efficient water softener. And we've been encouraging people to reprogram or optimize their softeners, have that done by a plumber or a softening professional, or to upgrade or replace their softeners at the end of their lifespans to increase their efficiency, overall reducing the chloride to the sewer system. And those are a really important part of reducing salt, but there are some limitations to that path, the increasing efficiency of water softeners path. One is that replacing softeners is expensive. So this isn't something that might be a high priority for people, and it's not something they're required to do. So we know we have inefficient water softeners out there, but it's up to residents and maybe their financial situation whether they can upgrade to a high efficiency softener. Also, I mentioned water softeners have a lifespan. They lose efficiency over time. So what do we do at the end of their lifespans? Do we need to just keep replacing those water softeners every 15 years? Do we need to incentivize to get those out of our sewer system so we can keep softening efficiency at an acceptable level? So basically, this is a big lift for some people, and it'd be a big lift across the community to continue every 15 years. So in addition to, not instead of, but in addition to increasing the efficiency of water softeners, we've been focusing on the other pathway to reducing chloride to the sewer system, which is softening less water. So this might be a new concept to people. You know, we have very hard water in this area. It leaves scale. So the scale can be a nuisance, can be an issue on appliances like water heaters, dishwashers, fixtures, things like that. And so we know that not everyone will want to stop softening or conditioning their water to remove hardness completely. The question we've been examining is there a middle ground between totally soft water and totally hard water, which is where blending valves come in. So this is a picture of a blending valve that has not yet been installed on a water softener. So it's basically a gate, a gate that can be fully open or fully shut to allow a certain amount of hard water to bypass the softener. So this is a pretty simple plumbing device. It's inexpensive, it's quick to install, and it's compatible with a lot of the types of softeners that are found in our area. And again, they work by diverting some hard water away from the softener. So some soft water still comes out, some water is still softened, mixed back into the hard water to result in a blend of hard and soft water, overall mostly soft, but still with a few grains of hardness in it. So to illustrate this in this simplified diagram, this is how a water softener typically works. So hard water is coming in from the source. So in the Madison area, this would be groundwater coming from the drinking water utility. It would go through the water softener. And when water goes through a softener, it removes all the hardness. So it's kind of all or nothing. The water that's coming out of a properly operating softener, which means one that's supplied with salt, is going to be at 0 grains per gallon, so completely soft. But when you add a blending valve to that softener, you can see that there's a diversion happening here. So the valve will, again, act as kind of a partially closed gate, divert some of the hard water around the softener, and then blend that back into the water leaving the softener, which is at 0 grains per gallon. So this blend results in slightly hard water. And however much hard water is diverted around the softener is how much less water will need to be softened. And that means that that softener won't have to work as hard. It won't have to use as much salt because the amount of salt that it's using is proportionate to the number or to the amount of water it's softening. So the more hard water you divert around the softener, the less salt you use. So I want to talk about levels of water hardness because we've talked about all or nothing. So these are numbers from the USGS, US Geological Survey, that define some ranges of water hardness from 0 to very hard. So you can see here that we measure hardness in grains per gallon. That's a typical hardness you'd see when talking about water softening or hardness unit. So from 0, the hardness that's leaving the water softener, to about 3.5 grains per gallon, that's considered soft. And then you come up to these other levels, 3.5 to 7 grains per gallon, moderately hard. Interestingly, this level is considered ideal by the US Department of Energy. So maybe a little hardness is actually good. It's not something that's going to cause those same impacts from scale as very hard water. Again, moving up that hardness concentration scale from about 7 to 10.5 grains per gallon would be considered hard water. But for context, if anybody listening grew up in Milwaukee or lives in Milwaukee or Chicago, you're used to water that is harder than completely softened water at 0 grains per gallon. That's because those communities use Lake Michigan water, which has a natural hardness of between 7 or 8 grains per gallon. And a lot of people in those communities don't have water softeners because when the concentration of hardness goes down, it's not going to be so much of a problem to see, or you're not going to have as many problems with scale, the impacts of hardness that we're worried about as this number gets higher. So for instance, at 10.5 and above grains per gallon, that water is considered very hard. So at this level, you're probably going to see more impacts from hardness, the scale impacts that I mentioned. All water in Madison, all the groundwater we're using is above this level. From the numbers that we have, the water hardness in our area ranges from 13 grains per gallon all the way up to 30 grains per gallon, depending on the well. And so that puts into context the levels of water hardness that we can see, but that there is a middle ground, that when we get down to these levels, the scale impacts are lower, and this is more in line with the water hardness of some other communities. The advantage of blending valves, one, I mentioned they're simple, quick, and easy. They can be installed on existing softeners and new softeners, but it's a pretty easy retrofit, and I'll talk about that specifically in a little bit, that if you have an existing compatible softener that's not at the end of its lifespan, you can get a blending valve installed by a plumber and reduce your salt on your existing softener rather than having to buy a new one. It's much less expensive than replacing a softener. So this is addressing that barrier of water softeners maybe being expensive for people. So these can be installed for maybe 100, 150 bucks, including the installation. It's a pretty inexpensive part, so this is much less expensive than a new softener. And this is a longer term solution compared to softener replacements. If people get used to and appreciate having a mix of hard and soft water from a blending valve, this is something they could use indefinitely. They could use it on future softeners as well. So that gives us that long-term chloride reduction we're looking for. And also, this is something that can deliver the hardness level you want. We've heard anecdotes of people who don't really like completely soft water. Maybe they're not used to it because they didn't grow up with it. So soft water can feel different on your skin than slightly hard water. People may not want to be using as much salt in their water softener. And so blending valves allow us to dial in that water hardness to a level that people want. They can also be shut off. So basically the softener would operate as it did without the valve. So people can have that valve adjusted to find the hardness level that works for them. I wanted to put some numbers on why blending valves are a good option for salt reduction. And this kind of combines the two paths of achieving less salt use, softening efficiency increases and softening less water. So don't pay attention too much to the numbers up here. This is just to show that these hypothetical houses, if they use the same amount of water per month with the same hardness level coming into their homes, so the same conditions of softening water, I have some numbers here to show the difference between a, kind of a middling efficiency 3,000 grain per pound softener in this house softening most of its water, 90%, compared to a house with a high efficiency softener, 4,500 grains per pound softening efficiency, softening most of its water. And then the same softening efficiency is softening less water, only 60% compared to 90%. So you can see what the difference is in salt use, that house one with the not very efficient softener softening most of its water, we use close to a full 40-pound bag of salt per month. But by increasing the water softener efficiency, we can reduce that salt use overall per month. Or by dropping the amount of water softened, you achieve the same salt reduction. So here's two different pathways. This is the more efficient softener. This is softening less water. Or even better, kind of the best outcome as far as salt minimization is both an efficient water softener at 4,500 grains per pound plus softening less water. You can see we've cut that salt use per month in half, or by more than in half. So this shows how those changes can add up as far as reductions in salt use. And the exciting thing is blending valves, even though they haven't been used much in the Madison area historically, these are starting to be put in place. So these are a few initiatives that the sewers district has encouraged to gain experience with blending valves, to get more installers and service providers familiar with blending valves. A local builder, Tim O'Brien Homes, started to include blending valves as a standard feature on their softeners in new homes in 2023. So they just put them in by default at a low level hardness. So this is a great green feature, a sustainable feature to get those home buyers to use less salt in their homes. Also, some Culligan softeners, so Culligan high efficiency softeners, have a built-in blending valve. Dial a softness feature is called. So if you have a Culligan softener, you can reach out to a Culligan provider to see if that feature could be turned on for you. Also, just this spring, this is brand new, we have an ongoing live pilot project in the city of Middleton, so partnering with Middleton to install blending valves on existing softeners. So with Tim O'Brien, they're putting in blending valves in new construction, but we are now putting in blending valves in residents' existing softeners in their homes. So as an add-on to that softener they have there. So because these haven't been used very much, we want to learn about people's experience, learn about the hardness levels that they're happy with, what the installation process is like, whether they notice a difference. So we can start to promote these more widely, get more plumbing companies and softener companies comfortable and excited about the idea of installing blending valves. If you live in Middleton, we are still taking signups. We have some installations that have been completed. We have more scheduled. We have more signups rolling in. So if you live in Middleton, you can take a sign-up screen to see if you're eligible to install a free valve. Basically, if you're willing to test it, you get it for free. So that's the pilot project we're running. Now, I'll leave before we open it for questions on just mentioning another way we can soften water, because blending valves are one way. In pollution prevention and reducing chloride, we're really focusing on all the tools, trying to learn more about all the tools we have at our disposal to reduce our salt use and still have the water quality that we want. So I just wanted to mention a few other things, so it's not just like blending valves are the only way. One way you can soften less water through a plumbing change or plumbing design is by softening only hot water and leaving the cold water hard. So scale hardness tends to precipitate out of water more effectively in hot water than in cold water. So to protect things like your water heater, that water is typically softened. Where cold water, like the water supplying your toilets, might not need to be softened. You know, there may be some scale that you notice, but that can be cleaned out. That there's steps you can take to mitigate hardness in fixtures. So if you want to reduce your salt use, you can consider softening only your hot water. Also, something that we really encourage people to do is to make sure that the water coming out of your outside spigots, so your hose bib, things like that, is not connected to your water softener, because we don't need to be using soft water outside. In fact, it can actually be harmful to landscaping and plants. And the more water that you're sending outside, the more salt your softener has to use. We have some hardness test strips that you can order from the district if you want to test your hose bib to make sure that that is hard water and not softened water. So with that, thank you. I will open that up for questions. And I can keep my slides shared if you want to go back to any, or I can stop sharing, whatever you prefer, Allison.
Yeah, you can leave it up.
Okay.
Yeah. Is that a photo that you took from one
This
of the
little fish.
monitoring? Yeah.
Yes, I didn't
Days.
personally take that, but that's from the district's fish surveys. We go out pretty much every year, and we test, or we survey the fish species in the water that we discharge to make sure they're happy and healthy. So it ties back to chloride pollution prevention and other pollutant prevention, that we're protecting these freshwater species.
That's great. I love that, Emily. Thank you so much. And it does look like we've got a few people online right now. So I'm just going to mention again, if you have any questions for Emily at all, or you want to say nice job, or send me some test strips, whatever. It's always great to feel like we're not just talking out into the ether. So feel free to use the chat feature on YouTube. I will also monitor my wisaltwise@gmail.com email as well to see. So I know sometimes, every once in a while, people have an issue using the chat function. Yeah, Emily and I were actually just talking kind of beforehand about both wanting to make some kind of changes and upgrades to our personal softeners, or Emily's soon to be. personal softener as a new homeowner. So I think, yeah, the blending valve thing is really intriguing and feels a lot more of a manageable kind of
Mhm.
bite-sized thing to tackle for
Yeah.
folks. And when I presented in Middleton last month, a couple months ago, I think there was a lot of interest in
Mhm.
that in amongst the audience members. So
Yeah, that is one nice thing about them. You can start small and they can always be adjusted after the fact. So you could start at a very low level. You could have it cracked open like 10% hard water, 90% soft water, maybe have 2 grains per gallon in the water that's coming into your home. It might, it probably would not be perceptible. It would vary person to person, but it's something you could say, all right, this is fine. I'm gonna have this turned up to a higher hardness level and just find what that sweet spot is for you.
I really loved the chart that you had that kind of broke down, soft water, moderately hard
Yeah.
water. I think, for me, I grew up north of Eau Claire and we didn't have a water softener, right? And I've
Mhm.
lived in various parts of the country without that. My aunt does live in California where there's also very hard water, but they're not allowed to use water softeners,
Mhm.
just due to concerns with, yeah, the scarcity of fresh water resources there. And I think people in the Madison area, probably like what, southern, southeastern Wisconsin, are just, it's just kind of the norm, right? The culture, we have these things in the basement and they aren't thought of too much. And yeah, why spend money on that? There are a lot of other things you could do with those dollars. But we do have a question here from Martin. Is a blending valve something that plumbers are familiar with? So the next time we need a plumbing appointment, I can just ask them. Or if they don't know what it is, what information could somebody point them to?
Mhm. This is part of what we're trying to build or just build our body of knowledge about through these pilot projects. We know that some softening companies and some plumbing shops do have blending valves. They're not widely available yet. And so you might, call up a plumbing shop and say, I'd like a blending valve. And they may say, oh, yeah, I've heard of that. They may say, I don't know what that is. We've never installed those. We have been working with the plumbing company Dave Jones on the Middleton pilot. We know that softeners like Capital and Helen brand softeners are compatible with this blending valve that they're installing. But again, they're not widely available right now. So this is what we're trying to build. And then once we have our results from the Middleton pilot projects, we'll continue our plumber education to talk about how they're installed, encourage all the plumbers in our area to be able to respond to those requests. We do quite a bit of education and training for local plumbers. So this has been something that we've mentioned in recent trainings as we become more familiar with blending valves. So we will be spreading the word and trying to make these more available in our area.